And it is really fascinating to think about how fashion or how psychology plays such a big role in driving our fashion choices.
Mhm.
And, from our personal style to trends that we're following to fast fashion and, of course, consumption and what we choose to purchase and how often we purchase. So, as a fashion psychologist, what have you found to be the main drivers or motivators behind fashion consumption choices?
Yeah. So there's a couple motivators actually behind why we shop essentially. The first one being we shop to express ourselves. So there's this concept called product image congruity, and it essentially finds that if we see an object or we see an outfit, for example, and we find that it has similar symbolic meanings that we can identify with, we are going to be automatically drawn to it because it's going to be a vehicle through which we can help express ourselves. And as individuals, especially with our desire to be unique and to have our stamp in the world, we're going to be drawn to buy things that help us to solidify that stamp. So that's one of the reasons why we buy. Another reason is because we're essentially just being duped by the psychological tricks that all brands actually use to kind of encourage us to shop. So if you go into a store, you'll notice that they all have their own kind of music, lighting, layout, and psychologists have found that all of that does kind of have a big impact on encouraging us to buy. For example, slow tempo music, it actually has been found to slow consumers down. So when you're in a shop, if you're slower, then of course you're more likely to spend more time in the shop, and the more time you spend in the shop is the more likely you're going to buy something. So you
Wow.
think about those kind of things as well, and even the layouts, a more kind of muted environment with muted colors and more organized store layout, that's going to appeal to more introverted shoppers. But things with more bright eccentric layouts, bright lighting, colorful layouts, that's something they're going to appeal to extroverted shoppers. And brands know who their target shoppers are. They know the makeup of them. So they use all of these principles to kind of encourage them to buy. And of course, there's other psychological principles that impact us all, things like scarcity, which we all know as FOMO. So, when they have limited edition collections, or, they show their sales, or those signs that say one or two items remaining. It may be true, maybe not, but they all, encourage us to have that fear that, okay, we need to get it or else we'll be missing out. And because we are all loss averse, so we don't want to think that we're going to lose out on something, we're going to be willing to purchase something in order to avoid that feeling. And then there's other things like reciprocity. So, when they give you those loyalty cards and you get all these points and they say, okay, here's £10 off. And then you feel compelled to use it. And then you end up spending £50 instead of the £10 that they give you because of that need to kind of give back in kind what you have been given in return. So those are kind of like the principles of persuasion that retailers use to encourage us to buy. And then, in another sense, another reason that we want to shop is to show our allegiance. So, we have this thing called our social identity, which is our identity in relation to our group association. So, for example, our culture that we belong to, our sex, our age group. We want to buy things that help us to maximize those affiliations and to help us feel a bit grounded in where we are. So, also, if you look at this theory called Maslow's hierarchy, it shows like all the things that we need to kind of feel like a fully actualized person. And in that hierarchy, it has our need to belong.
Right.
So, of course, when we buy things that are in trend or in vogue or it's part of the cultural zeitgeist, it helps to reinforce that identity. It helps us feel like a part of the moment. So, again, that's going to be a strong motivator to get us to buy these things that help us feel a bit more secure.
Right.
And I think those are kind of some of the main principles that encourage us to buy. But as you can see, there's a lot of things fighting against us. When we go into a shop, we get that rush of dopamine, we get that rush of adrenaline, and that all happens before we even make a purchase. So it's almost the act of shopping itself that is really enticing for people, which is always why I encourage mindful shopping for people. Well, I guess we'll discuss this later. But there's a lot of things to combat against before we shopping. So that's why I don't believe in chastising people for buying so much, because there's a lot to contend with. And if you look into the research, shopping actually does have a positive impact. Retail therapy has been proven time and time again by psychologists. So it's about being mindful of how much you shop and how much you're using shopping as a way to boost your mood, and just making sure that what you're buying is truly things that you value, that you'll cherish for a long time, so that you don't feel the ramifications of like overconsumption.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes why people suggest maybe staying away from these stores completely that tempt you so much, because it's a lot to fight against. I mean, I have been on my slow fashion journey for many years, and there's still things that tempt me because they look so beautiful and they're displayed in such a great way and they say the
Yeah.
right words. And it's definitely very, very challenging. There's a lot we're
Mhm.
up against. So, which kind of leads me to another question. So, clothing production has been increasing rapidly in recent decades with the rise of fast fashion and now even ultra fast fashion. And we see all these statistics about people, primarily in the global north, buying more, wearing their clothes less, and then as a consequence, wasting more. And it feels like
Mhm.
we can never have enough clothes, right? We always want to have fresh outfits. What do you think on a psychological level might be driving this increase in production and speed of consumption?
Well, I think as humans, we are hardwired to be attracted towards novelty. So that instant gratification that we feel when we buy something new, that's not something that I think is going to go away overnight. We're always going to be attracted to new things, and it's always going to increase the demand to have these fashion items. But I think one thing that we can do is to encourage more mindful shopping. I think if you get people to really deep dive into what they already own, and I think that's kind of the best way to be sustainable is to shop what you already own. But look at what you have and think about how you can work with that. And also, before you even go shopping, make sure that it aligns with what you already own, because there's so many studies that show that if you buy something and you come home and it doesn't align with your wardrobe, instead of just returning it, you're just more likely to just buy more things to go with your like initial purchase. So it's about deep diving into what you have and cherishing that. One thing I always think about is the history of my clothing. So say I got an item, but say it's from a fast fashion brand, like I think about how I can cherish it, how I can keep it for a long time, the implications that's going to be involved in getting it repaired. If I want to pass it down to maybe a family member, or if I want to do clothes swapping or selling it, thinking about all the ways that you can give your clothes meaning. And if you give your clothes meaning, then you're more likely to kind of give it another life and give it a better chance of being more, circular rather than going into the waste heap. And I think one great way that people can think about this before they go shopping is to do a simple sum, which is called CPW. So that is like clothing cost plus maintenance divided by number of times worn. So that gives you the cost per wear analysis. So I always ask people, say you want to get a nice dress, you got a cheap one for like £50, but you've done no maintenance to it and you've worn it once and then you threw it away. So that dress costs £50, right? But say you spend more time on maybe a luxury or a sustainable dress that costs a bit more, say it costs £100. You maybe want to take it to the tailor or the dry cleaner to get it fixed, to give it a bit, make it a bit more you, create that attachment to it, which helps you create more ownership to it. You do that, okay, now it's cost you £110. But now because it's it's fitted, you've taken care of it, you've worn it 10 times, actually, when you do the cost per wear, you find out that dress is only £11. So it works out cheaper in the long run. So it's like about getting people to do all of this thinking before they make their purchases to help them be more mindful and more conscious, and in the long run, develop a stronger attachment to their clothing, which will in turn reduce their wastage.
Yeah, absolutely. I love those tips. and that sort of twist on cost per wear, like adding in the maintenance, because
Yeah.
sometimes we might be hesitant to pay for a tailor or something like that. But if it gets
Mm,
us to wear the piece more, it all works out in the end.
exactly.
So, thinking about the drivers of consumption, I think it would be interesting to talk about sort of the flip side, so to speak, as
Hmm.
well. So, what do you think are some of the deterrents to more conscious consumption? So, buying less, fewer, better things, choosing maybe more sustainable brands over fast fashion brands. What deters
Hmm.
us from doing that?
I think it's just about, I think sometimes it's hard for people to want to change out of their habits, right? I think people are very stuck in their ways and they just want to do what works for them. Especially with the pandemic, it's been such a tumultuous time. People are looking at easy ways just to make themselves feel better. Although, at the same time, people have become a bit detached with their wardrobes. And they have been starting to think about, do I really need all this stuff? That the opportunities to wear a lot of their wardrobes has almost been cut in half. But at the same time, they want that pick me up. They want to experience the positive impact of dopamine dressing. They want to experience the positive impact of novelty. They want the dopamine rush. So it's really hard to combat, especially in the troubling times that we're in. So I think if you just encourage people to just take a second and to really do a bit more thinking before they shop or before they buy, I think that will be a big help into changing that behavior and into breaking that habit. So one thing I've kind of recommended is to do some wardrobe ethnography. Wardrobe ethnography is all about deep and dive into your wardrobe and figuring out, do these items really signify who I am now? Are they going to help me into the next phase of my life? And that's what I call the continuing identity. If you can find clothes that fit into that continuing identity, these are things you want to keep, and these will give you an inclination of what you need to buy in the future. And these are clothes that have kind of a long shelf life as well. And I think that's what we need to think about, giving your clothes as long as a life as possible. And then look at clothes that are in your discontinued identity. So clothes that maybe don't fit, clothes that are falling apart, clothes that are from brands that you don't really align with anymore. If you really think about, your beliefs and where you stand, there's a lot of clothes that we have that don't fit into that. And it's interesting because, especially with Gen Z and millennial, studies show that they are so socially conscious, but then they do tend to be the biggest buyers of fast fashion. So there's a lot of cognitive dissonance going on there. So I think if you actually take the time and to do a deep dive and a bit of introspection, you'll start to make the changes towards buying and dressing in a way that aligns with your core beliefs, which will essentially at the end make you happy. And then when you do go shopping, I advocate the 4-3-2-1 rule, which is what I'm calling it. So think about what you have, and are you going to wear it in 4 years? So look in the future. Think about, is this going to be in line with my continued identity? Is this for the future person? Is this going to help me in different scenarios? If yes, then you wear it. Then think about three, is it going to be something that you can wear with three different outfits or at least three different occasions? A lot of time when we buy something, we think about for the Insta post or for the TikTok or, just for that one shot occasion. If it's not going to be something that you can wear in the future, it's not for you. Two, always take two deep breaths, just to calm down that sympathetic nervous system that is firing when you think about shopping, or that dopamine, adrenaline that's flooding you. That allows you to have a bit more control over your decisions. If you have that control, you're less likely to be persuaded by, all of the persuasive tricks that I mentioned earlier that retailers use to encourage you to just buy. And then have one night sleep. I think one night sleep is a good rule we can use for everything, whether you're about to, be sucked into a really terrible purchase, or you're about to send your ex like a bad text. Just have one night sleep, and you'll come to your senses in the morning. So if people are willing to take the small steps, it will help them to really battle all of these persuasive tactics and all the chemicals that are rushing in our brain when we're contemplating buying something that we really probably shouldn't.
Yeah, that's such a great trick, that 4-3-2-1. I love that. I'm going to definitely remember that. And I totally see the one night sleep. I like to always sleep on something, sometimes even for a week, even if it's a secondhand purchase, to just really
Yeah.
make sure that I'll make use of it. So that's really great. So, when it comes to marketing sustainability, right, either sustainable fashion brands or brands trying to look sustainable, it's all uncharted territory. And we talk about it a lot in terms of the lack of regulation, the lack of standardization. But I think it would be really interesting to also talk about what sorts of things are actually effective. So, what can behavioral psychology potentially teach the sustainable fashion community about effective communication?
Yeah, I think one of the first things that would be great to do is to encourage an emotional attachment to the clothing. So, like I mentioned before, if you have that connection with the items that you own or that you're planning to own, you're going to be more likely to give it a longer life. And I think that's one of the best things about sustainability. It's about, giving your clothes that new lease of life or encouraging circularity. And the best way to encourage attachment as well is to give your customers like the information that they need to give your clothes that extra leaf of life. If your clothes need to be dry cleaned, if they need to be washed in a certain way, let that be known so that your customers can make the most informed decisions possible, especially with regards to sizing and measurements. Like, let them know exact sizing or use more inclusive models so that they can fully see themselves in the clothes that they're planning to buy, and really let them know if it's going to be something that works for them or not. Arm them with as much information as possible so that they make the right decision, so that they don't have to return or they don't keep it for a long time and then chuck it away. Just let them know all of the facts so that they can really buy clothes that are going to be perfect for them. And another thing is, like I mentioned before, about that sense of belonging being so important for our social identity and for our need to belong to specific groups. Give people that sense of belonging, create more communities. I'm aware of a lot of clothes swapping apps as well that allows you to connect to different people, to share your beliefs and discussions. I think that's so powerful because it gives people that group where they can feel that connection, and it will encourage their shopping habits in the future, and it will allow people to share ideas and to share tips and tricks, and to share information, because as you mentioned, there's still a lot to learn about sustainability. There's even a few people who think fashion and sustainability are kind of oxymorons. So, as much as people can be informed and it can help them make more mindful and thoughtful practices in the future, the better. And if you can create that group space and the dynamic to do that, that would be great. And I also think that people in general do want to be more sustainable, especially Gen Z and millennials. They're some of the most conscious people going so far, and they do want to be more mindful about how their actions are impacting the planet on a global scale. So I think that you need to stop chastising. I think it's more about, understanding that there is a difficulty there. As I mentioned earlier, there's so much to contend with and to battle before you even enter a shop, that is all persuading you to buy and to break away from your beliefs. But if you chastise them, what's that going to do, right? It's all about, letting people know that, we know this is difficult, but we want you to help you be more in line, your actions and your beliefs, so that you can avoid the cognitive dissonance and that you can feel better. Dopamine dressing is such a huge trend right now, and it focuses on a lot about how certain clothes and how styles can make you feel happy, but it also makes you feel happy if you know that you're buying something that is aligned with your core beliefs. So if you can encourage that or promote that through your marketing and for your communications, I think that would be incredibly effective.